Thanks so much. Everybody can hear me. Thanks so much, Hope and Kristen and Vanessa. Sorry, who have I left out? for inviting me to speak today. Okay, so anybody who's heard me speak before will know I love photographs and I love showing photos So I'll show lots today, and I'll try and sort of sum up the last 30 plus years of research as an example of, I guess, the going into institutions, looking for photographs, looking for data, and adding to that. So starting with this photo, when I was a young sort of researcher back in 1990, going into the State Library of Queensland for the first time, and going through their, looking at all their Aboriginal photos and coming across a category of photos called Aborigines - unidentified location. And there was a few hundred of these photos in that category. So this was actually a group of photos I pulled out from them and started researching. I looked at these photos and said, particularly when I joined an ARC project with Jane Lydon back in 2010, I asked a question: were these photographs taken in Brisbane or not? And that was a very basic question, but every one of these photos had basically no data. What you're seeing there, Aborigines - unidentified locations, the only data attached. No donations, no anything, just that. So I've purely got these images. So that was 1990. Since then, I've done a lot of research, and out of this set of photos you're looking at, there's only 2 images that I can't say who took the photograph. So once you can say who took the photograph, you can then, it's easy to look at basically where that photographer worked within what time periods, and you've pretty much got a pretty good idea on where. I'm sure these photos were taken in the Ipswich or Brisbane region, but I just can't name the photographer out of that group. The next lot in that group were taken by Chris Roggenkamp at Warwick. And how I know that is because, because one of those, I've added a photo to that first group of some, so you'll see I'm adding photos to that first group of photos I've showed you to put into context how I know. But this man sitting on the chair, the reason I know that, because I've got photos of, I think it was Chris Roggenkamp's wife sitting on that exact chair, and I'm very confident that it was taken in his studio. Warwick, a small regional town not far from Brisbane, with very few photographers in the 1860s, 1870s, so very few photos of Aboriginal people. So these couple of photos become very important. Again, this adding to that original group, these photos were all taken by Heinrich Muller in Toowoomba. Adding photos. Now, in amongst that first group of photos I showed you, there were several photos that I was really curious if they were taken in Brisbane or not. I've managed to identify that, and by adding these other photos, that they were all taken in Maryborough, which is, say, 300 kilometres to the north of Brisbane. So if you're looking at these people, that bit of data, knowing it was taken in Brisbane or Maryborough, 300 kilometres is a big distance. Completely changes, whether people may be descendant of these people or not. William Knight, early photographer in Brisbane, accumulating these ones. John Watson, a very early photographer, started working in Brisbane about 1861. So really in amongst this set of photos, just see if I can point. Oh, maybe I'll point to that man. The man standing up with the club up the top there in the top left-hand corner. I know his name. So he's the first person out of the photos I've shown you today that I can name him. And I was only just actually, what day was it? Wednesday morning, I was sitting on a panel at University of Queensland with a descendant of that man. He has many descendants in the Brisbane area today. Okay, Thomas Bevan, again, another early photographer. And that man I just pointed out, I'll just point out his daughter. That's it. So coming down, so I'm starting to track generations, and then she had 5 children, and then from those, there's lots of descendants today. And then Daniel Marquis. So again, this is starting with a few unidentified photos with nothing attached. I've familiarised myself with basically the carpet that he had in his studio, the curtains, the skirting boards, the direction of the light, and obviously matching up photos that are clearly identified with his professional stamp and his address. So that's, so it's quite a lot of photos, so it's really growing the number of people that I've got, hard facts. These people lived in Brisbane in the 1860s and the 1870s, and the ones that didn't. An example, this photo of this young girl, sitting in the Pitt Rivers Museum at Oxford with data attached that says New South Wales ? Victoria ? In fact, the exact same photo sitting in the Queen's Museum with the actual street number in Brisbane where it was taken. So we know exactly where that's taken by just putting two bits of data together. This photograph is sitting in Pitt Rivers Museum as well, with Western Australia attached to it. In actual fact, the other photo of the same man has the stamp, it has A. Waddell, who was Andrew Waddell, a Fortitude Valley photographer based in Brisbane. And going back, I've spoken to the curator that looks after the Pitt Rivers photographic collection, and we've analysed the guy who donated this photo to the eventually ended up in the Pitt Rivers Museum. His name was Dr. Barini, and we figured out he was an absolute compulsive liar. So you just don't trust anything he wrote down, So the fact that he wrote Western Australia, so you're putting into context why the wrong information is there with lots of research. Again, this photo, one copy, just recent, only found this photo within the last couple of months, sitting in a collection in Russia, and the other photo sitting in the State Library Museum. There's actually two copies of this photo in the State Library Museum. One of them is listed in the category unidentified location, and the other one says it's in Mackay in North Queensland. And in actual fact, you can see on the back of the stamp, thanks to the photo in Russia, it's definitely taken in George Street, Brisbane. And again, I know the exact spot where his studio was. So moving on, so that's looking at trying to name photographers. So this is, then after doing that, I sort of moved on to doing the exact same thing, trying to name people. So here's a photo of William. I think I've left out the better image I should be showing. I've got a photo of these four men sitting together, and I've sort of questioned what is their connections and wrote a paper about it that was published by the Royal Anthropological Institute in London. So here's William. How many photos of William, of one man I've been able to find? Here's Johnny. And William and Johnny were always together. So I've basically had to cut Johnny out of the photos and cut William and Johnny. They spent so much time together. Here's Fred. So there's the photo that I was talking about of the four men. So I've only managed to find three photos of Fred. But we know where his breastplate is. It's still in the family, still belonging to the white family that gave him the breastplate originally. And Kawali Sandy that I mentioned before, this is how many photos I've found of him, and multiple oil paintings as well. So what I've done with this data, I've done masses of genealogical work to sort of try and figure out who these people are, where significant events in their life occurred. So what I've done is added, as part of an ARC project, 5-year ARC project I've just completed, I've added that data into dots on Google Earth of where I know they appeared. So here you're seeing, and the reason you see they're the basic claim areas in Brisbane, and we've heard many people over the last 2 days acknowledge the Yuggera and Turrbal tribes. But to me, that I'm sort of questioning even those words, because who are the Yuggera and the Turrbal? So I'm looking at people who were there 100 years ago, living in Brisbane in the 1860s, 1870s, looking at them as people, putting names to them, figuring out exactly which studios, looking at their relationships, like these four men. What are their relationships? Why are they sitting together? Do they even like each other? Are they brothers? Are they cousins? I'm asking all these questions. I don't have answers for them. What is their relationship to the photographer? And then I start asking questions. Well, do they belong to the Yuggera tribe, the Turrbal tribe, the Cubby tribe, the Ningi tribe? I start and then basically I'm finding lots of data that basically conflicts with these basic beliefs of what tribe these men are supposed to live in, because I've put them into the yellow tribe, which is the basic claim area over Brisbane, people refer to as Yoga and Turrbal, but you look at their dots, they haven't stayed in the yellow area. I guess they didn't know about modern claim boundaries. And then moving on, well, to my family, the man seated there in the centre, or near the centre with the breastplate, he wore a breastplate that said Jackie Jackie, King of the Logan and Pimpamar. And I've just published a paper through ANU at Aboriginal History Journal, basically stating that wrong names have been attached to this man. In fact, a wrong name due to somebody misinterpreting information. A name was attached to him that he was never called within his life. He got confused with another man also known Jackie. And now you have a suburb in Canberra called Billen suburb. Is that a suburb in Canberra of ACT, I've heard, that he's not, that is supposedly named after him. So you're looking at the dots of him and his daughter, his son and his daughter. You see the movement. So politically, he's supposed to sit in the blue tribal area today under the current native title claim over that area, but you can see how him and his two children moved. So here's a photo, the lady in the far back with the white collar, that's Jackie's daughter. So that's my grandfather's grandmother. So Jackie is my three greats grandfather. The man in the centre with the pith helmet is my great-great-grandfather, William Williams. And moving on, and five of their children are in this photograph. And that Eliza, you see on the top left-hand corner, that's my grandfather's mother. So, I've managed to track down, again, the movements. So that's my great-grandmother's and all of her siblings, all 12 children. I've managed to find photographs of all 12 and track their movements. And again, you can see they don't stay in the blue area where modern native title politics says they're supposed to stay. And moving on, back to this photo, the lady sitting beside Jackie is actually my grandmother's. So that was my grandfather's family I was talking about. This is my grandmother's grandmother sitting here in that same photo. So you're seeing her and her children's movements with these blue dots. And there's her daughter, my great-great-grandmother Sarah. This is my great-grandmother Jenny Graham, my mother's grandmother. My mother, she only has three grandchildren still alive. My mother's one of them. She's the youngest, and she remembers her as a young child. My mother lived in the house where she died and spent her last years. So you're looking at photos on the lady in the centre of that group photo is Sarah, my great-great-grandmother. The little girl just off to her left is my grandmother, and the man reclining is my grandmother's oldest brother, Frank. And connecting back, the two boys in that photo, they're my grandmother's older brother Frank's twin sons, born 1899, the same year as my grandmother. So she was their auntie, but born the same year as them. They are Kawali Sandy's great-grandsons. So I'm sort of connecting, all these families together through these coloured dots. And the non-Aboriginal man on the left is my great-grandfather, who married my great-grandmother in the middle there. So sort of looking at their children, again, and looking at their movements over time. So you're seeing definite patterns of people staying, connecting to country, but not quite staying within the boundaries that modern native title politics expect people to stay. And then these are just the general dots from all the masses of research I've done. You can see the people in the yellow tribe, you're sort of bringing lots of people together, looking at their movements, and you can see definite patterns of, in this sense, overlaps between the yellow and the red. The green and the yellow really don't overlap much at all. It's a sort of, so you're seeing definite patterns of groupings of people. So in a sense, to me, these are alternate versions of tribal maps. They don't, as I gave this talk, showing these photos to a biological science in the biological science school at UTU the other week, and they were talking about polygons and variations to the polygon. So I guess that's what it is. And here you've got the people from the North Stradbroke claim area, the light blue tribe, the Gold Coast desert area, which is the dark blue tribe, and you can see absolute overlaps between the two. But in modern politics, they're kept very separate. And people from the north and the south, sort of the orange dots are the people coming in from New South Wales, and the pink dots are people coming down from Sunshine Coast and Harvey Bay. So that's sort of trying to cram 30 years of research into 10 minutes, I think. I hope I haven't gone over. But I guess my big point I wanted to make, after just showing what I can do with the type of research I do, is, you know, actually create stories that people can connect to. And as I said, you know, I questioned this, people just confidently naming tribes that even federal court judges have disputed the people making those claims, or the particular people making the claims and promoting those tribal names, and saying that these tribal names, these tribal groupings are so much more complex. But really, and the big thing is that I can't do this work unless I can walk into institutions and get access to lots of photos. So it really is about access. I can't do this without access. So, and what I'm seeing happening of recent times is institutions are basically, as part of reconciliation action plans, are basically introducing policies saying that you can't look at Aboriginal material unless you have permission off traditional owners. And here I've just explained with my dots on Google Earth, the traditional owner groups and their connections to country are very complex. And you've got institutions trying to look for very simplistic strategies that just say, go out and get a signature. Then you go, if you do fill out the form and you do go out and get 5 signatures for Brisbane, if you want to look at photographs from Brisbane now at the Queensland Museum, you need 5 signatures of 5 different political groups. Come back with those 5 signatures, and who within that institution questions the quality of those signatures, and are they the right or the wrong people? So that's sort of the big thing that I'm asking, that this sort of this issue of new policies being introduced just to tick boxes and have these new procedures referred to as cultural safety. And I guess as a final comment, I'll just say, you know, I cross over into the arts, you know, arts cultural area. I work with a lot of artists. A lot of my friends are artists, and I look and admire their work. And what I guess artists do is they take risks. Every time they make a film, write a book, you know, produce any artwork, they're potentially going to offend people, you know. And I even myself, you know, I'm here talking. I may say something that offends somebody. It's the risk that arts and cultural workers take when bureaucrats are very risk averse. So it's a whole different mindset. So is that? Thank you. Yeah. Assume there might be questions.
Do you think it will improve, or is improving, in the sort of current collection of information and objects and photos in libraries and in archives?
No, it's getting worse. Yeah.
In new collection of stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously digital technology is incredible. I can't, you know, I wouldn't be having access. I mean, I wouldn't know about these photos in Russia if it wasn't easy for somebody to find them, then share them by email and whatever. So that. But in a sense, you know, there's no, you know, the technology I was using 30 years ago, walking into the State Library and with a big handful of coins so I could make lots of 20-cent photocopies, to walking in now with a digital camera. Yes, it's improved, but it's still basically the same technology. There isn't a point where the work I do has changed technologically. It's just technology just keeps getting better. But it's, you know, it's this issue of, being able to go into institutions and of course within institutions, there's secret sacred knowledge, there's information that was collected unethically, there was things that can harm, you know, some things can harm, but it's this over cautiousness of, you know, what are the risks? And as I said, that's why I sort of jokingly sort of said, I'm standing here talking, I'm taking a risk. I might say something that offends somebody. It's a bit with policy, you know, with somebody managing collections, it is about taking risks. It is about, providing something. And if somebody's offended, it's about dealing with it. And that's why I have a problem with disclaimers saying, here, warning to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers, there'll be images of deceased. And it's almost like saying, well, if someone's offended, say, well, didn't you read the sign at the door? Go and get stuffed. You should have read rather than actually taking on the response. As I said, you make a decision, you're taking a risk, and if you get it wrong, deal with it properly.
Michael, that was absolutely fascinating, and the amount of work that's gone into it is mind-blowing. But you say that people are now saying, well, you have to get consent, but you can't know who they are until you've actually got the photographs, which are anonymous, completely anonymous, and then started to find out who the descendants were. So what are you given some blanket approval to go in for public good? I mean, I can imagine if I were, if I had my great-great-grandmother in a photograph, I'd love to know that it was her. But, there may be some blanket approval that you could get, because it seems to me it's actually important. It's almost therapeutic what you're doing for some families to know who their ancestors were, perhaps. And maybe there you could get some kind of global approval from these museums and places. I don't know.
Well, it all depends on the manager, who's managing it, whether they let me view or not. Some institutions will, some won't. And that's why, particularly, I showed that photo of the man identified as Western Australia. If that photo then ends up in a Western Australia category and I'm denied access, that can never be sorted. It will never be sorted. So it really is. It's just a matter of, I think what I'm seeing is institutions are changing their policy of late. In the past, I've had good access, and I'm in a fortunate situation where people are sending me stuff all the time because I know I might be able to help. So, yeah.
Case study. This is a great case study. It's very different.
Well, that's why I made the comment before about if people have access to information, two things can happen. People may, obviously good may come from it. People may use it for political purposes for bad. And you even said yourself, knowledge is power, but you can use that knowledge for bad if you choose to, if you're a bad person. And then there's the risk and the harm, so it's really asking the question, what is the risk? What possible harm may happen? And if some harm happens, how do we deal with that? How do we make sure it doesn't happen again?
Michael, we've got some online comments and hands raised. Professor Langton, did you have a question or comment for Michael or the room?
I've run into this myself, Michael. Look, congratulations. That is a wonderful presentation. Love your work over many, many years. But just think about the inherent racism of the position that the GLAM sector is taking in relation to archival material related to USMOD. If you're white, you can go on ancestry.com and you have universal access. You can go on Trove, you have universal access to records, photographs, etc. But if you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, you run up against this crowd of highly sensitive, easily offended people who freak out if they see a photograph of a naked Aboriginal person, or even just a photograph of an Aboriginal person, historical photograph, and they jump to censorship as their first line of defence against being offended. And the levels of censorship against us Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander researchers now has reached the point of insanity. Have a look at the latest nonsense coming from the Sydney University, where their librarians have caved into some woke nonsense in Sydney, and they're going to stop us from having access to Sydney University libraries and archives. I mean, even books on shelves if it discusses Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I'm about to write a response. So this jump to censorship, especially from Aboriginal people, is, I find, verging on fascism, frankly. And you know, it's coming from people who actually don't do research. They think they do research, but they don't do research. They're not trained researchers. And they want to censor us researchers because they're offended. What are they offended by? They can't even tell you. They're so embarrassed about nakedness, about, you know, people sitting on the ground, you know, I don't know what they're embarrassed about. I don't get it. Anyway, I just want to thoroughly concur with you. And yes, if we don't have accurate information for building our future in native title systems and other rights and administration systems, we're in big trouble, because so many people will be excluded by false information. And we see this happening all the time in native title claims. And we see dodgy research by, you know, people in the native title sector. They leave out entire families. And your research shows exactly how it happens, because we're not allowed access to the data. And when we're not allowed access, we can't interrogate the data. We can't interrogate the photographs. And you're right. Most of these photographs are anonymous. And yet I can tell you a story about an idiot from the Human Research Ethics Committee here at the University of Melbourne telling a poor PhD student some years ago that she wasn't allowed to use any of these anonymous photographs, even though the mob she was working with wanted her to, unless she spoke to the descendants. I mean, how stupid do you have to be? You can't find the descendants if everybody in the photograph is anonymous. I had to write to several deans to get that idiot decision of the Ethics Committee overturned. Totally with you, brother.
Thank you, Professor Langton. Michael, we've got a comment from Julie Andrews, Yorta Yorta Rogeri Woirung. Julie, are you available online to perhaps make that comment to Michael in the room?
Yeah, I was just posting a comment there, but I just wanted to say and agree with Marcia about the way that I'm really interested in how we're engaging with archives and photographs and how it informs our stories and our narratives. And that disconnect from native title is one of those areas that I think we need to be aware of when we're working and doing research on family. And I really enjoyed listening to your presentation. I apologise for coming so late to it, but I also liked the way you said, take the risk. And that's what we have to do, you know, get our confidence up to actually push the boundaries with our research and not be nervous about who we're going to offend.
Thanks. Just in response to Marcia's comment about native title research, the article I wrote about those four men, you know, one of them, Kerwally, wore a breastplate, said King of Brisbane. I've got access to all the native title documents for the Brisbane native title claims. Those four men are sitting together. William does not get mentioned anywhere in all the claim documents. Johnny does not get mentioned anywhere. Fred gets one paragraph, and basically every single thing in that paragraph is wrong. And Kerwally gets about 2 paragraphs. So and then ignored. So and not listed as a apical elder of Brisbane, even though he wore a breastplate saying King of Brisbane. So that's an example of, I guess, the research I do. The photos, in a sense, force me to be democratic. I see a photo of these men and I have to deal with them. I can't just ignore them.
Thank you so much, Michael. You know, we've known each other for some time. So I just wanted to sort of explore a little bit our conversation from yesterday, where we were talking about the changes in access. You know, we've all known stories of anthropologists who've collected really incredible amounts of data, photographs, field notebooks, and then those things have been not digitised. We've gone through this big phase of digitisation. And I think one of the things you and I were talking about was the different practices of museums and galleries and research that you're doing is to look at everything, not just a small data set. It's literally every photograph that exists. So I just wondered if you could explore that a little bit in terms of the transition over time to now we've got this new censorship that's going on because of what you've sort of explained, and just broaden that out so the audience kind of knows that a bit more.
Well, I guess I could say, yeah, look, as far as looking at everything, one of my main research tools is Facebook. People are going on Facebook saying, I'm the most important traditional owner of Brisbane. So I then, okay, I'll do a bit of research here and see what I can come up with. I guess you can say I'm finding people who are claiming to be Aboriginal. My research indicates they're not Aboriginal. You know, so but no one else is questioning these people. I am, you know. People stand up at universities in Brisbane, do welcome to countries, and I'm standing there saying, but, you know, 2 federal court judges said that person is not a traditional owner of Brisbane. It was reviewed. 3 more federal court judges supported the first 2 judges. And I say 5 federal court judges have said this person's not a traditional owner. And people say, but how do you know that? I said, because there's 100 pages of judges' findings on the internet. It's easy to find, but people aren't asking the question.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for sharing today.
Can I just ask a very timely question?
Lunch.
Look, what Marcia says is sort of a legal question, but they're your private publications, and you can use it. You don't have to get approval from the Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Study. But if you do, you go through a process of certainly a legal process, and then you can get access through the Institute to publish, and they'll tell you whether you can publish them or not, okay? I just wondered a little bit about the dates that you're working on. As a historian, you should be using dates about when those photographs were taken, because I use Baldwin Spencer's documents, for example, as an example. They are all approved, and they're great photographs that were taken at the turn of the century. Were your photographs taken at the turn of the century? Because you talked about
1860s.
1990.
Yeah, 1859.
I didn't quite hear whether you were talking about 1890.
I'm talking 1850s or 1860s. 1870s have been my big interest I was talking about today. And I guess in my opinion, history starts with the invention of the camera. You know, I only look at that in that era.
Cameras at that time were not that great.
Yep.
So maybe that affected the photographic quality. But Roth, for example, did a lot of photographic work, and I wondered if you saw them, or were those photographs in Russia?
I'll just finish with a comment, if that's all right. Gordon, I've got to acknowledge I'm the biggest thrill of coming to this conference is seeing Gordon. Last time I saw him, we were in South Dakota together in 1989, and we were really at the first international conference dealing with the archaeology and the ethics of dealing with human remains. Gordon and I were two of the 50 Indigenous people at that conference that co-signed the document called the Vermilion Accord in 1989, which was the guiding document to the 1990 Native American Grave Goods Repatriation Act. So it's just absolutely a thrill to be here with you.